Memories of Creature 88 by user RegalLegalEagle. Chapter 13. House Call. Vincent hoped that he'd eventually find out just what the hell kind of game he was involved in. Was he merely a piece on the board being moved around by Mock in opposition to some other figure? Was he an independent player moving through on his own? After seeing into his own past, he couldn't help but wonder if he was the villain. It made him uneasy to ponder. Mock was right that focusing on pity and distress wouldn't solve the mystery at hand, but maybe Mock was playing him. Questions. He was tired of not knowing. Now he was in a craft speeding towards the home of the recently deceased Yervish council head with even more questions. Every meeting he'd had with the old bastard, he had called Vincent a shade at every turn. Made it clear that he hated Vincent and thought the money spent on him would be better spent elsewhere. In the early days, he'd made sure every one of Vincent's investigations were triple-checked and had him file endless paperwork confirming every little detail. So now to find out that he told everyone that he only trusted Vincent and had in fact set up his house to only open for Vincent and himself was bizarre. It also raised the question, how the hell had he died? He tapped his comm as the craft took him away from the worm ship he'd synced at towards the Yervish's house. Cavizor, you said the house was locked?
That's correct. Only your DNA signature or his could unlock it.
Why not just break in?
That would activate the security systems.
So? Couldn't you guys just turn off the alarm?
Yes, but we're a bit more worried about the automated blaster cannons and the fact that his home system would start deleting itself. We need to find whatever information he has relating to all of this.
Fair enough. Was it normal for important Yervish to have automated blaster cannons installed in their homes? That brought up another question. How did he die?
We don't know. That's why we need you to unlock the home. Before you ask, we only know he's dead because his heart was set up with a remote monitor like all important hierarchy officials, so the AI can be updated as soon as something happens.
Like a heart rate monitor or something? How's it sure he's dead?
I'm not a doctor, but according to the sensor, his heart stopped and hasn't started in quite some time. Unless he's in suspended animation in a house without such facilities, then he's dead. Or maybe he's frozen, I don't know. Why are you asking me, Creature 88? This is why we're sending you in, to get some answers.
Vincent figured Cavizor was tired of having all those questions too. He was a bit surprised that such an important official didn't live in Sector 1, but instead he lived on an elevated platform that was technically part of Sector 2. It was sort of like a Sector 1.5, really. It was stuck firmly in the clouds at this point of the day? Night? He looked out of the craft and caught a brief glimmer of sun and nodded. Day. Either way, he didn't have any neighbors, which gave him plenty of privacy. He didn't know how to fly one of these crafts, but he hoped they had some sophisticated tech to let him see through the clouds, or they might be crashing down the door of this place more literally than he wanted. But sure enough, he felt the vehicle shift, and soon they were coming down on a platform lit with giant floodlights. There were other craft around, and numerous Yervish teams standing around waiting for him to open the door to the structure. As he stepped out of the craft, Vincent got a better look at the structure itself. It was a relatively low structure, looking like it was composed of a single massive floor with a few little towers. It was very straight-lined and simple, but somehow achieved bold-looking lines. Very angular. Maybe the Spartan designs of the Patrol HQ were indeed what the Yervish preferred. Then he noticed that the towers had guns on them. The outer walls had boxes along the top that he figured held more. There were cameras just on either side of the door that were focused on him as he walked closer.
Identify.
A robotic voice commanded as he stood before a massive wooden door. It looked like they'd taken some massive piece of solid dark wood that had streaks of light red within the grain. Vincent. Unknown. Identify. The voice urged, as he saw the boxes overhead open slightly. Vincent sighed softly. Shade. The boxes closed back up, and he had to cover his eyes as some sort of light was suddenly emitted from the cameras as they ran over his body. Welcome, Shade. The wood door opened, and he turned to wave over the Yervish teams, but as he did, the voice spoke again. No other visitors will be allowed until certain parameters are met. The boxes on top of the wall started to open again. Hold up, guys, hold up! He quickly jogged over to the approaching Yervish, waving them away. The door isn't letting anyone but me inside just yet, apparently. What did you do, Shade? Some Yervish growled out. I just opened the fucking door. I don't know what to expect. Just wait here. He walked back to the door as he shook his head. The entire structure was dark just past the entryway, and try as he might, he couldn't see anything in the gloom. He glanced back at the Yervish and then shrugged, stepping forward into the darkness. Once he was inside, the doors shut behind him, and he heard a click as the lights began to turn on around him. He was standing in a wide entry room that led to a hallway. There was a blaster cannon in each corner of the room pointed at him, so he didn't feel like moving. But he did like the style. It was panels of that dark wood speckled with light red along the floors and walls to about his hip. Then it turned to a light gray metal. Stainless steel, maybe? Was that a thing? Either way, he liked it. Proceed. The computer voice commanded as he began to walk down the hallway. The light metal contrasted the dark wood quite nicely, but the bright overhead lights hurt his eyes a bit. So am I talking to something intelligent? I am sophisticated, but I am not a true AI. So why am I here alone? I am following instructions set by my owner. So he's dead? He is deceased. By this point, Vincent reached an open room and paused as he looked around. The furniture was made out of more of that same wood, while the lining was a light gray material that matched the metal along the ceiling and upper wall. Overall, he was rather impressed with the sense of style the Yervish had. It looked like something he might see in some fancy penthouse in a high-rise in Pack City or Tura Bay. There was a fire pit in the middle of the room with a hood coming down from the ceiling just above it. Sleek-looking metal and wood shelves covered in books. He was even surprised to see some framed paintings on the walls. They were very abstract, bold, contrasting colors that made interesting shapes that made him feel like he could vaguely see an image hidden within. So far, he didn't see a body, and the computer voice was quiet, so he headed to the very well-stocked-looking bar. He was examining the various bottles when the voice spoke up. Would you like a drink? Sure. Any recommendations? My owner enjoyed an extensive list of beverages depending on his mood. Vincent snorted a bit and shook his head at the idea. Was the old pain in his ass an alcoholic? So, what would he have when he needed to get some work done? Clarify. Will you be able to sleep once the work is done? Vincent snorted at the question. Seemed like he certainly was a drinker. No. He heard some buzzing, and then a section of the bar opened up before a glass rose up. It was a sturdy-looking tumbler filled with some sort of smoky liquid and... a twig? He shrugged and lifted the tumbler up. Unlike the drink earlier, he wanted to take his time with this one. He sniffed at it for a moment, nodding as he got a whiff of smoke and spice. He took a sip and arched his brows at the flavor. It was like drinking a liquid forest fire. Rich, earthy, smoky, and an aftertaste of heat that burned his throat. Shit, how do I get myself a home like this? It's pretty damn nice. He looked around the big room as he took another sip of the drink and then bared his teeth at the burn. You have to file a request form with the council to take possession of the prisoners in the basement. What? Prisoners? This guy has prisoners locked in his fucking basement? They are criminals, deemed too dangerous to be in a normal prison. They are all serving consecutive life sentences. I thought all cases regarding multiple life sentences just get executions. There are exceptions. Vincent waited for more information, but none came. Well, I'll explore that later, but for now, I suppose you should show me to the body. The body is in Arid Garden 1. Arid Garden 1? Several lights dimmed around the room until Vincent had a path lighting the way through the room, past the fire pit in the center and out through another hallway across the bar. He looked down at his drink, taking another sip before setting it down and following the lights. He came across a door that looked a bit like an airlock, which he stepped through only to find another door just beyond that. When the door closed behind him and he heard the hiss of air, he realized it must actually be an airlock of some sort. When the door before him opened, he groaned a little at the sudden wave of heat that hit him, and had to wince, the bright light pouring in, hurting his eyes. As he adjusted a bit, he stepped out and found himself transported to another world. He was out in what looked like the Arizona Red Zone, only without the melted buildings and charred corpses everywhere. "The fuck?" he muttered aloud as he looked around, feeling like he was on some big plateau. He looked back at the door, which looked like it was set into some massive pillar of stone rather than a wall. He could see blue sky stretching out around him, and for a moment he wondered if they had teleporters but never told him. Then he walked towards the edge and noticed that the view was a little off. He stood at the edge of what looked to be a massive drop to the ground below, and then very carefully reached out and tried to feel around with his foot. He felt something support him beneath the plateau, and saw a ripple as he put a little weight on it. He was in some sort of hollow garden? He finally looked to his right, along the length of the plateau itself. There were some scraggly-looking plants, vines with blue flowers, a few small trees here and there. It was a far cry from the lush gardens the dragon enjoyed up in Sector 1, but he could tell it was cared for just as much. Then he noticed the coloring of the rocks, both behind him and out in the valley below. It was a mixture of whites and reds that made him think of the Yervish kabuki makeup. Was this an image from their home? He began to walk along the edge of the plateau, but didn't have to go too far before he spotted the body. "Jesus," he muttered softly as he spotted it. There was blood staining much of the rock and dirt around the path, turning it into a sticky-looking mud. Someone had cut the chairman up pretty bad. It looked like 1,000 gnomes had attacked him with knives. There were little cuts all over his body. This certainly wasn't going to be an open casket. It seemed too elaborate to be chance. This was either a ritual or a message. Vincent looked around the area for a moment and sighed. "All right, I'm here. What did you want me to see?" He scratched his chin for a moment. "Computer, what am I supposed to see?" "The question is outside my parameters." Vincent sighed. Clearly the chairman wanted him to find something, but he hoped it wasn't a fucking puzzle. He had enough of those already. "Why was I the only one allowed in the building?" "My owner needed you to have unfettered access to find something he left behind. Only you were trusted with it." "So what is it? Where do I find it?" "This information has been removed by unknown source." Fucking fantastic. Vincent shook his head as he looked at the body before him. Dead chairman, blood mud, rock garden. What did he have to work with? "Do you have recording devices? Video and audio?" "Yes." "Playback from the chairman's death." "There is a 3-hour dead period in my memory that has been erased by an unknown source." "Of course there is. How many exits in and out of this room?" "1 exit. 3 air vents for climate control." "How big are the vents?" He looked up the pillar of stone, or whatever the actual material was, trying to spot the vents. "The vents are 2 meters by 20 centimeters, spaced as required to keep the garden in perfect atmospheric conditions." He doubted something 20 centimeters high had slipped through a vent to do this, and then got out, but he was dealing with Xenos, so he wasn't sure. "Are all the prisoners accounted for?" "Yes." He shrugged then and looked around the area before crouching next to the body of the dead chairman. From the position he was in, he looked around the garden slowly, at the little plants nearby, at the fake plateau moving forward, at the rock wall to his left, and out across the seemingly empty air to the other pillars of stone across the way. Then he paused. Standing up, he walked to the edge of the plateau. "Will the screens or whatever support my weight?" "Yes." He was still a little hesitant as he stepped down from the ledge, but besides the rippling around his feet, it felt like normal. So he walked out toward the stone pillar in the distance right up until he ran face first into the actual wall. "Motherfucker!" he gasped as he pulled back, rubbing his face for a moment. His nose hurt, but it wasn't bleeding. Reaching out, he felt around to actually identify where in front of him the wall was. The pillar looked much further away, and the perception was messing with his head. But he finally got a good sense of his distance and set his hands on a part of the wall that showed the image of that distant pillar. Hey, is this stuff one giant screen or made of smaller panels? It is comprised of smaller panels. Vincent tapped on the one just in front of him. This one is upside down. If you look at the patterns on the rock, they don't quite match up. The wall in front of him shimmered for a moment. That is correct. Panel A392 is upside down. This is different from my last garden screen check 3 days ago when all panels were in proper positions. Can you detach it or something? The panel hissed and then pulled away from the wall as Vincent caught it and set the now black panel on the floor. It still messed with his head to look down and see what looked like 1,000 feet of nothing before ground way down below. Then he looked out through the hole and saw a small walkway leading to another airlock. What's past the wall I'm looking at? That is an exterior wall. Do you have visual on that exact spot on the outside? He looked up as the computer was quiet. No. A small craft could potentially enter a very narrow blind spot and reach that portion of the exterior wall without ever being recorded. This is a serious safety concern and should be addressed. Well, got a point of entry. He walked away from the small hole in the wall and then climbed back up on the plateau, looking down at the chairman's body and around for a moment. Up on a ledge in direct line of sight to the little hole behind him and the chairman's body in between was a small potted plant. It looked like many other plants, but nothing had been in a pot yet. He walked over to the ledge, pulling the plant down, which he quickly realized was a very good fake. Tossing the plant inside, he pulled out a small recording device set in the pot and smiled. I'm guessing this is what I'm meant to find. Vincent looked around before setting the pot down and fiddling with the recording device for a moment before finding the right button. When he did, he pressed it and heard the chairman talking. Shade, if you're listening to this, I'm dead. They've got to be coming for me. They already know all of my security codes, so I can't use the house computer for this. They call themselves the Wardens. They came to me with promises of better security for our citizens. They said it would all work for the greater good in the end, and we just needed to make the situation bad enough to justify passing new laws, to better fund patrols and start connecting cameras to a central AI throughout the city. But I never meant for it to get this bad. It's out of control. Vincent snorted a little at that understatement before he focused on the recording once more. I might not like you, Shade, but I know I can count on you. You've always protected the citizens despite your somewhat unorthodox methods. That was the general Yervish way of saying Vincent was often insane. I have no idea who else is a part of the Wardens. They could have their eyes and ears everywhere, but you're not a part of it. You're the key to their plans somehow, but they didn't reveal to me the full extent of the operation. I just know they wanted you constantly on patrol. They said sooner or later your natural instincts would kick in when the time was right. The fuck did that mean? Vincent frowned as he tried to figure out what his natural instincts were and how they related to all of this. I need to keep all this information secure and private. If they found out I warned you, they'll step up their plans, and we don't want that. Except you guys can watch my memories, Vincent muttered, realizing the chairman's plan likely wouldn't work. And while I never wanted to reveal this to you, it seems I must. Go into the prison. There will be a room at the far end of the cells. It's a control room. Once you activate the main console, tell it the phrase purity through fire. More will be revealed. They're coming. Hold on. He couldn't hear anything for a while and then heard a deep voice. You were trying to expose us, Chairman. You're mad. The Shade informed me of your plans at the factory. You were going to kill dozens of Yervish commandos. None of this was part of the plan. At first I didn't want to believe him. I was furious, thinking he was lying for some reason, but he wasn't, was he? Those were your commandos in the drug lab trying to get the scientist. The Shade is moving faster than we want.
We need time to temper him correctly. I'm done. This is not what you promised at all. You said a small increase in crime, and a few unfortunate but necessary events. The lower city is going mad. The Shade is the only one keeping this all together, and you're offering bounties to anyone who kills him or patrol. Why? For the future security of the Union and the solidified power of the hierarchy. We told you this. It's getting harder and harder to convince the idiots who make up the majority of the citizens to approve of the laws and measures needed to ensure our continuing greatness. They need to be brought to heel. You know this, Chairman. You agreed with us. But I didn't agree to mass murder. It's like you want out-of-control rioting to start. There was silence for a moment. So that's it, then. You want the lower city completely out of control. To make it easy for the hierarchy to agree to take away their rights. The less voters, the better. We need the select in power, not the masses. You wanted this. I wanted better funding. I wanted safer streets for innocent citizens. I didn't want whatever this is you're making. The Shade will stop you. No. He's part of this even if he isn't one of us. He's a tool. You said as much yourself. When the time comes, he will act in the interest of protecting the city. When he does, the AI will finally see that he isn't just a point of data. He's the solution to the equation that it's been looking for. It will trust him with more power than any one person has in the hierarchy. And then he will burn the city clean. After that, he'll become an asset once more to be controlled by those in power. By us. And the best part? Once he finds out, he'll agree with us. You're insane. I might hate that creature, but you're wrong. He'll protect the city, not burn it clean like you say. You lack vision, Chairman. Burning the city clean is protecting it. Enough! Vincent heard the sounds of fighting then, but it went very poorly for the chairman, obviously. Vincent grimaced a bit as he heard the screaming, but kept listening until the end. Finally, the deep voice spoke again. Such a pity. Sir, should we destroy the building? No. We don't want to overplay our powers so soon. It would make it clear how strong we are. Just wipe the computer of the last few hours. Be quick about it. He had a heart sensor, so it won't be long before patrol arrives. Our agents can delay them a bit, but only a bit. What about the facility in the prison? We don't have time. It's not like they'll ever find it. The chairman didn't have a black box, and without that, even the Shade can't get information out of a dead man. After that, Vincent heard movement, but no more talking, so he turned the recording off. How do I get to the prison? I've lit a path outside the airlock. Vincent left the dead chairman behind and stepped back out through the airlock. Following the lights that led him through the house, he was soon heading downstairs. There were more of those large security guns in the ceiling watching him as he moved through a strange green scanner system and up to a massive vault door. The door hissed as it began to open, and he stepped out into a room with suspended cells arrayed around an open pit of sorts. More guns on the ceiling, the walls, and the floor. Clearly they didn't take security lightly here. The cells had black walls he couldn't see through, but the faces shimmered with some sort of force field. "Help me, please!" He jerked a bit in surprise as a high-pitched voice pleaded, and he saw in one of the closest cells seemed to be a little Yervish girl. She looked emaciated and malnourished, bruises along her arms and her face that made Vincent's blood begin to boil with anger. "You have to let me out, please! Whoever you are, please help me before the bad man comes back!" She was crying and pleading as Vincent rushed to the controls, but then he stopped. "None of this makes sense," he said out loud as he looked over at the girl. "What do you mean? Please, you need to let me out! Help me, please!"
The chairman might have been a drinker, but this was too much, especially after the recording Vincent had listened to. "Give it up already. He isn't falling for it." Vincent heard another voice and turned around to see a reptilian figure in the other cell. It was very lean and athletic-looking, but overall it made him think of the bush vipers he'd seen in the zoo as a kid. His scales raised up away from his body, forming jagged patterns of greens and blacks. His head was more triangular than a human's, but otherwise had a very humanoid figure. 2 arms, 2 legs, approximate size. "Fuck off, Balder!"
"I mean, please help me, sir."
The girl's voice had gotten deeper when she cursed the other prisoner. "Yeah, I'm not letting you out," Vincent said, and watched the girl hiss and slam against the shield for a moment before her form twisted into a blackish figure that looked like it was made out of tar or oil or something. "You're such a piece of shit, Balder. I would have let you out, too." "I doubt it, Pyrrha. Besides, this is the Shade. He's not an idiot." "This is the Shade?" The vaguely female creature leaned closer, seeming to look at him with more interest. "How can you tell? Have you ever seen a creature like him before? And who else would be invited here?" "Well, are you the Shade?" "I am." Vincent looked between the cells at the 2 prisoners. "And apparently you're Balder and Pyrrha?" "We are. Have you heard of us?" the ooze woman asked with a sudden purr. "No." "No? No, how have you not heard of my exploits? My terror spree was famous." "I only got here a year ago." The creature huffed, crossing her arms, or sections of her ooze body that looked like arms. Vincent wanted to talk to these creatures, but he glanced down the pathway suspended between the cells and saw the door at the far end. He'd return for them, though he did look into the other 4 cells as he walked past. The second on the left had some sort of metal cube in it that was about the size of a car. Strange. Second on the right was what looked like a fleshy, furless bulldog that had green spikes along its spine. It looked at him and then opened its mouth as a massive tongue snapped against the force field. Vincent just kept walking. Third on the left was a tall, very skinny creature staring at the far wall that had nothing on it. The creature reminded him of a vulture since it had some sort of feathers or fur around most of the body, but not the long neck and pointed avian face. Third on the right was filled with water. He didn't wait around to see what was inside, but pressed on to the door beyond. The door slid open as he approached, and he found himself inside a control room of sorts, much like he expected. Chair, terminal, some monitors, nothing that looked unusual. So what was he here to find? He sat down on the chair and tapped on the terminal. Purity through fire. Suddenly the chair leaned back, and he felt the pinch of a jack being plugged into his skull. He was about to fight it when the computer spoke up. "Welcome, Shade. What memory would you like to edit?"
No fucking way.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for this one today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for existing. I appreciate that. As always, if you would like to like, comment, subscribe, go over to the Patreon, check things out. You'll get access to this early. Well, not this one because you're already listening to it on YouTube. But if you go over there soon, you can get early access to other videos and things like that. And also, we've got the Discord. Please go ahead and click on the link in the description there. Head on over, hang out with everybody. We've got all sorts of crazy stuff going on over there. Lots of great conversations. So again, guys, thank you for watching. I appreciate you. And who in your life made the biggest impact for you? Who was it? It can be anyone. Just who is it that made the biggest impact in your life? It doesn't have to be positive. It doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't have to be any kind of thing that's like, earth-shattering or anything. But who made an impact in your life that, you feel to this day? But all right, guys, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you coming. And as always, I love you. Bye, y'all.